Hey, welcome to Module 3. This week we are going to look at how we might use photography tricks and camera angles and mimic those concepts in our writing. In the module this week, we've looked at some standard camera and film angles in the short YouTube video that I had you watch. I also asked you to read the opening chapter of Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. And right after this lecture, I'm going to have you watch the first part of the 1946 film adaptation that covers the same chapter. But first, let's look at how the camera angles might look if you were planning to make your own adaptation of Great Expectations. I'm going to walk you through how I would see it. So now we are in the director's chair, and I'm going to show you how I might choose to break it down into different shots. So let's go through the beginning of the chapter piece by piece. The first angle I want to talk to you about is an extreme long or an extreme long wide shot. And that's a shot that covers a large area. It frames the subject from a distance, but focuses more on the surroundings. The purpose of that is to give us a sense of setting, to give the character or characters a relationship to their environment. It may or may not include a character, but if it does, they are not that discernible. Within the first few paragraphs of Great Expectations, we find this description. Ours was the marsh country, down by the river, within, as the river wound, 20 miles of the sea. My first, most vivid and broad impression of the identity of things seems to me to have been gained on a memorable raw afternoon towards evening. Now, if you could imagine how you might film this, what would it look like to you? You'd want to convey somehow what the marsh country might look like and give it that distance. We also know it was a memorable raw afternoon towards evening, so it's getting dark, it's getting late, and you'd want to include that as well. Next, let's look at the long shot. This typically shows the subject from top to bottom. For a person, this would be head to toes, though not necessarily filling the frame. The character becomes more of a focus than that of the extreme long shot, but the shot still tends to be dominated by scenery. This shot will often set the scene and our character's place in it. This can also serve as an establishing shot or opening shot instead of the extreme long shot. So, a little further along in that first chapter, Pip is looking back to see if the man is going to follow him, and we see the lines, "The marshes were just a long, black, horizontal line then, as I stopped to look after him. And the river was just another horizontal line, not nearly so broad, nor yet so black. And the sky was just a row of long, angry red lines, and dense black lines intermixed." So, if I were filming this and trying to convey Dickens' concept on film, I would try to make sure that everything had a more horizontal lean to it, and I would try to avoid round sorts of objects that would break up those lines. So, the film clip you will watch later is in black and white, but if you were to do it in color, think about how you would film that sky. The red lines with black lines intermixed has a stormy feel to it, don't you think? The next shot type we'll look at is the medium long shot. It shows your character or characters mostly from the knees up, though sometimes a bit more than that, and some of the background. Here, the background is less important than the long shot was. The focus is now on the characters. In Great Expectations, in my mind, it would be perfect shot to use for the following description. A fearful man, all in coarse gray, with a great iron on his leg, a man with no hat, and with broken shoes, and with an old rag tied around his head. We can picture that coarse gray and that old rag tied around his head instead of a hat. But he has an iron on his leg, which means he's some sort of prisoner. He looks scruffy and scary and probably very much in need. And here we have the medium shot. This is taken from above the head to about the waist. It allows you to get to know your character better by viewing their facial expressions and body language and gestures. A passage from the book that would work well with this shot is when Pip first encounters the man. "Hold your noise!" cried a terrible voice, as a man started up from among the graves at the side of the church porch. "Keep still, you little devil, or I'll cut your throat." To me, I think we'd want to see his movements here as well as his facial expressions as he's saying these terrible things to Pip, who is just a little boy. And now we move to the medium close-up. This shows the upper half of the body, from the top of the head to the middle of the chest. It's really good for conversation between two characters, and I think it would be great for the following conversation from the first chapter of Great Expectations. "Tell us your name," said the man. "Quick!" "Pip, sir." "Once more," said the man, staring at me. "Give it mouth." "Pip! Pip, sir." You can just imagine this little boy who is terrified of this scary man who's just appeared from in the graveyard, from among the tombstones. My camera angles would want to catch the facial expressions between the two characters as they talked. I would show Pip shaking with fear, but I would also have the man convey his fear too, because he's afraid he's going to get caught. And here we have the big close-up shot. This is where the head takes up the entire frame and contains little to no background. It is used to detail the character's face. I think for me it would be really good for that line when the man says, "You, young dog," said the man, licking his lips, "what fat cheeks you've got." And the narrator, Pip, thinking back on it later, was thinking, well, yeah, I probably did, but I was still small for my age. But we would really want to see the expression on this guy's face. We want to know, is he kidding? What does he mean by it? And what clues can we gain from looking at his face close up? What would that face tell us compared to his words? And to zoom in even closer, we have the very close-up shot. This is anything that is just part of the face, from the forehead to above the chin. It shows the details of the character's eyes and mouth, and it can be used to heighten tension. This still is from the charming 2001 French film Amélie. It is a much sweeter scene than the one from Great Expectations that I think would be ideal for this type of shot. From Dickens, I would choose the following lines. "A man who limped and shivered and glared and growled, and whose teeth chattered in his head as he seized me by the chin." So that might be a mix, but I would definitely center in on his eyes and mouth with those chattering teeth for a few seconds, because he's miserable too. He's cold and wet and scared and starving. And finally, the extreme close-up shot. This is the detail of an object or the physical features of a person. The purpose of this type of shot is to make the viewer aware of some specific detail in the film. It is also used to create tension. In the film The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Clint Eastwood's character, seen here, is locked in a standoff with another gunfighter. The camera cuts back and forth between the two men, each time zooming in closer and closer until just their eyes are visible. In Great Expectations, we could use the lines so that his eyes looked most powerfully down into mine and mine looked most helplessly up into his. This is the point where the man grabs Pip and stares him down, trying to scare him into helping him. Now, if you look here, what would you call this shot? Think back to what we have reviewed. We can see both characters, but only from the chest up. So it's definitely a medium shot. If you think for just a moment how we might write this in reverse, we're looking at just a picture here. What would you write about if I asked you to describe this man? Take a look at his hair, the roughness of his beard, and the cut on his cheek. His clothes are dirty and worn out. Look how rough the man's hands are as they grasp Pip's collar. If you had to describe him, what words would you use? I hope this helps you break down camera angles a bit more and see how we can use them in creative writing. The next time you're struggling with how to convey an image, try to frame the shot. It works. Okay, see you next week. Bye-bye.